But hey Gerald, how's it going, man?
How are
Good.
you?
How are you guys doing?
Doing
Welcome.
good. Doing good. We're Robot and the Bear podcast with me, Luke Chu, and Eric Nakamura, and our guest, Gerald Powell,
Yep. Episode
virologist,
62. Episode 62.
episode 62. And yeah, I'm still kind of dealing with this, like letting people know that we're not
Yeah.
streaming
So,
kind of
Gerald,
thing.
what happened last week? What happened? Gerald Pao's a virologist,
Well,
and he's able to tell us a little bit about what really happened, as far as you can tell. We know Mr. Trump contracted SARS.
yeah,
he
SARS-CoV-2.
he got the Chinese virus.
Yep, he's got the kung flu.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he got it unless he faked it, but
I don't know. Well, okay. Well, there's a lot of like interesting things going on with the events of last week and this week, and I think the big question that has been kind of you know hovering over all of this is like what is the most reasonable timeline for a virus like this. um,
so so the timeline is highly variable. So typically when you get infected, it takes you about 3, probably 4 days before you have any symptoms.
Right. And
It can be a
he was
little
showing symptoms by Friday, right?
Well, no, Friday 1 a.m. is when they officially announced it. So he must have had symptoms on Thursday. And apparently he was tested on Thursday. That's what some of the reports say.
Right.
And then they had the White House physician say on Saturday that this thing had been going on for 72 hours. And then he backtracked and he said he misspoke because if it was 72 hours, then they probably knew Wednesday.
Do you think they knew now? Like one of the we had I posted something on my my personal Facebook page, and you had commented about it. And this, I think, I don't remember exactly what it was, but you kind of like sketched out a general timeline of like, when he, like you think he might have been infected and when like, he should be developing symptoms. And it was kind of dead on because you said like within 24 to 48 hours he should be showing symptoms, and lo and behold, by Friday afternoon, or
Yeah.
symptoms were. And I posted this on like as soon as I found out Thursday evening.
Everybody found out Thursday evening. It's like basically like officially it was like 1 a.m.
Eastern Standard Time.
Eastern Standard Time. So for us was like 10 p.m. or so that we
Right.
all like, whoa, what's going on there?
Yeah.
Like,
Social media exploded.
yeah. And
When
then like so then like if you track back, okay, so it's basically so the beginning of the week or last week at some time. But it also depends on how much you get and how long it takes for things to show up. So everybody's thinking that something that happened in the White House on last Saturday,
Right.
and that was and they saw a large number of people. So you have White House cluster, a classic White House cluster,
And that was the
like
announcement.
where you actually had, yeah, basically that the Supreme Court candidate,
Right.
and a lot of these people were unmasked, and they were both indoors and outdoors. But they were sitting relatively close unmasked. So you
Right.
don't know whether they got infected outside or inside. I mean, outside and inside, if you're like outdoors, I mean, statistically speaking, and that's on average and an aggregate, you're 20 times less likely to get infected. It doesn't mean you cannot get infected,
Right.
especially if you're like whispering into somebody's face or just screaming into somebody's face. You know, the chances of you infecting are going to be high, regardless of indoor or outdoor. It's just that
Like
outdoor.
bodily contact, hugging, all those
Yeah,
kind
I
of
mean,
things.
you can see from the videos that all of that was going on.
Yes.
So But I mean, that's probably, you know, I think it's probably less of a factor because we are now know that it's like where the virus grows really well. And the
Right.
virus grows really well in your nose, in the
Mm-hmm.
nasal epithelium, which is basically the mucous membranes inside your nose where you get your smell,
Mm-hmm.
and also your throat.
Mm-hmm.
Those places it grows really well. So
Right.
that's probably where it has to start. So anything that you breathe in will land there, and that's sort of like that's a good landing pad for the virus to grow. And if you have like large numbers, then it's going to grow faster. If you have small numbers, it's going to grow slower. I mean, that's how it works. And
Mm-hmm.
then probably, and also like it might land many times, not just once.
Right.
So I mean, it seems like everybody is like so. That's I think it's like that's the first, and then it's like I think you might actually have two cycles of infection. So the people when you're most infectious
Mm-hmm.
is before you get symptoms. So probably like Wednesday or so, like Tuesday, Wednesday is when the president was most infectious. I don't know when the other people were most infectious, but there was basically you probably had a whole bunch of people that were very infectious around that time.
So
So
how does that work though? Because that's kind of that kind of in my eyes that kind of defies like logic because like when you are showing symptoms, you're coughing, you're sniffling, you're like doing like I would imagine you're literally just producing particulate,
yeah,
and
well,
but you're saying that you're actually more infectious before that.
yeah. So this is like the funny thing about this virus. So if I'll backtrack now and the lessons we know about flu. So the thing that we studied a lot before, and we know flu really well, a flu that is very transmissible is upper respiratory tract. So if it's upper respiratory tract, is your nose, your throat, the upper part of your lung, you like the bronchial stuff, it's basically then, and you cough the stuff out, and then it transmits really well because of the upper respiratory tract. So you have large amounts of virus up there, and you transmit it. But if it's upper respiratory tract, you like your regular flu, you get sick for a few days and then you recover, and you don't get severely sick. The viruses that make you severely sick, like the 1918 flu,
Mhm.
or like the bird flu, like this H5N1 that people were afraid of, that occasionally people got infected with, that was very severe, and a lot of people died.
Mhm.
That is lower respiratory, so deep in your lungs. So the deep in your lungs is very severe,
Mhm.
but it doesn't transmit very well because it's deep in your lungs. So it's hard for you to cough it out and get it out to this thing.
Right.
Now, comes SARS-CoV-2. So SARS-CoV-2 is doing something completely different. It's growing very well in your nose and in your throat,
Mhm.
not causing many symptoms. So you're spreading it very well.
Right.
And later on, it infects your lung deep inside. And then the problem of the infection in the lung is not the virus, seems to be that is causing the major problem, is your immune response to the virus that's in your lung that makes you sick. So you get very sick later on because of your immune system reacting to the virus rather than the virus itself doing all the damage. So that's a very different thing. So
Mm.
it's like, you know, all the lessons that we had, some of the lessons that we had from flu are applicable. Some of the lessons we had from the flu are not applicable. This thing is its own thing, and its own thing, and also like um, the SARS-1. The SARS-1 was basically deep in the lung. It didn't get it grew, it was doing much better deeper in the lung and made people really sick, and actually much more sick than this one. But like 1/3 of the people died or something like that.
Mhm.
Mm. You looked a little bit delighted explaining this thing.
Well, it is like, it's like the delight of a scientist. Like, okay, oh, this is kind of cool that we understand. It's basically like now we understand. This thing actually makes sense. So that's kind of I'm delighted in that
Oh,
sense.
okay. You look kind
So
of happy. You're like, well, this one can do this and it does that, but then it fucks you up later. You look so excited. I'm like, this sounds awful.
because it
This is
makes
like
sense,
it's like
right?
bad news, bad news, bad news. Okay, so into context, like we were talking about, uh, I guess no one knows where he got it exactly, right? It's probably from one of the staffers, maybe, or something like that.
I mean, in theory, I think it's like if you if you were to sequence everybody's virus, it's very possible you could trace them.
Oh wow.
Hmm.
Yeah, you could actually trace like this virus is identical to this one. So okay, they must have had some transmission between them or an in between person.
So you've watched all of the media. I'm sorry, not the media. The doctors speak out about all the press conferences. You've probably seen all of those, correct?
More or less, I think I saw at least
Do you
most of
know
them.
any of those guys, or have you heard of any of them?
No, and that's like one of the things that's crazy. So the White House physician is a DO. He's not an MD.
A what?
What's a DO?
He's a doctor of osteopathy.
What's that?
What's
Like a
that?
foot
It's
doctor?
an osteopathic, like a holistic medicine or something like that. I mean, it's like when people used to do phrenology and things like that. I mean,
Oh,
most people would not consider them. I mean, actually, there is no. There, I think there's 30 some osteopathic schools in the United States. They're generally, they're none of them are research universities. They're not considered to be like the best doctors in terms of. I mean, they probably receive adequate training, and there was a heavily lobbied for them to be medically accredited, I think in the 1950s and 1960s, so they could actually practice medicine. But um, but yeah, it's like that's not. It's like when people want to go to med school, you don't want to go. You generally don't want to go to become a doctor of osteopathic medicine. You want to become a doctor of allopathic medicine or like an MD, right?
Hmm.
wow.
And then like his doctor is a DO, and I was like, whoa, this is kind of strange. Why did they pick to have a DO as the White House physician?
Is he only there for? Do you know if he's only there for Trump's presidency, or is he always there? Like, is he?
Yeah, sure. I read in the New York Times that like he's only been there since 2018.
Oh, I see.
So
Wow.
Yeah,
Sean Connolly is
He's
the
the guy with the short hair that always
yeah,
speaks first.
yeah,
Wow. Okay. Because he
yeah.
wears the
So it's like
same.
it's a little bit, it's like I mean, from the people I know, I'm not saying generally, like the people who go there is because they didn't make it into med school and then go to a DO school to. Uh,
Wow.
uh,
So, okay, that's
yeah,
already weird.
Dr. Connolly graduated from Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine.
Oh, is that one of the Trump's colleges? Maybe that's one of his.
oh no, they're not Trump
No. Oh,
scholars. I mean, there's
Hmm.
like I think there's a completely different tradition of the medical concept. It's like it's more like kind of a touchy feely kind of
wow.
also mixing chiropractic and medicine.
Hmm. Okay,
You
so
know,
that's
like,
already weird. That's a weird start
Yeah,
already.
it's really weird. Like I don't really understand it very well why they would pick this guy to be the White House doctor.
well,
Like, is
the Trump administration has, from my assessment, is only interested in people that will toe his line. The
uh,
Donald Trump line, rather
yeah.
than like give the hard, potentially bad news. But like I don't know. I mean, I never when I heard that Donald Trump was hospitalized and stuff like that, I never one for a second like really thought to myself like, oh, he's like his life is in danger, because there's this too much
Well,
like
I well, one thing is like clear that he was probably in bad shape. I mean, literally what they did to him is like they threw the kitchen sink. You
mm,
know, they tried everything. And some of the things are like the most surprising thing is the dexamethasone.
right. I was
And,
about to ask you about that.
and the dexamethasone is because the dexamethasone, there was a British clinical trial that showed that if you're on oxygen and then basically if you get dexamethasone, you're 20% less likely to die. And if you are on a ventilator, basically, on a ventilator, not just getting oxygen, but this artificial breathing that helps you, which is the ventilator,
All right.
then you're 30% less likely to die if you get dexamethasone. But if you get dexamethasone, if you have light symptoms, it's almost certainly going to make you worse, because dexamethasone, like all these steroids like hydrocortisone, but dexamethasone is the strongest one. If you give dexamethasone, it's also immunosuppressant.
Right.
So, for example, if people have autoimmune disease or too strong of immune reaction, you give them dexamethasone because it's immunosuppressant. But if you're dealing with a virus, immunosuppressant is not what you want, right?
Right.
But if,
Right.
if your immune response is too strong, it's gonna as a risk of killing you. Then you hit the, then you hit it with, as immunosuppressant dexamethasone. So, for example, people get it for allergic, like severe allergic reactions and stuff like that, or asthma, which is also an immune response that inappropriate. You use steroids to suppress that.
Right.
So, if he was not seriously sick, nobody in their right mind would give him dexamethasone.
Right.
First, that
Or unless he was that bad in that bad a shape,
exactly, yeah.
But like,
And I mean, there are plenty of qualified people from Walter Reed.
right, right.
You know,
Is Walter Reed like one of like a top institution for medicine?
Walter Reed is sort of like the top military institution,
Okay.
but it's like the all the government is sort of managed through Walter Reed.
Right.
I see.
Right.
I mean, back in the day, as I remember, I seen the people from Walter Reed coming to County USC,
Mm-hmm.
And the people coming to County USC because County USC had the most gunshot wounds anywhere. So in order to them treat gunshot wounds, they would come to LA County, and then so these military docs would be able to have a chance to see gunshot wounds.
Wow.
We're sending them there and to John Hopkins in Baltimore.
Oh yeah, probably a lot of gunshots there too.
Yeah, they had
for sure.
There they actually had like a different thing. They actually had an agreement with the local gangs that it could be treated, and then no questions asked.
Wow.
In exchange, they would not bring their turf wars into the hospital.
Wow. So let's back up. So we were talking about the news. Let's just say the next day, Friday, you saw the press conference. What did you think? Did you think, oh, he's in worse shape? These doctors are, whatever. What did you think in the beginning?
Well, my first guess was that, okay, so normally all the drugs that the Trump received are things that you have to give in the hospital. But since he is the president, they could probably give it somewhere else. So normally, like remdesivir
is the other drug I was going to ask you about.
The drug that you get, that's a 5-day cycle. So you have to get it for 5 days. So I imagine the first thing they would give to him, because I'm assuming that they caught it early on, is they will give him remdesivir early and start him on a cycle. And the drug works best there. Under normal circumstances, if you get anything IV, you have to get in the hospital. So you have to be an inpatient in order to get an IV drug. And then, but being the president, I'm sure they can have a IV in the White House, for example. But they didn't say they gave him. So the first thing they say they gave him like 8 grams of the Regeneron monoclonal antibody mix. So basically, this is equivalent to the convalescent serum. So basically, if people who recover, people have tried, to take like serum, which is basically the blood without the blood cells, which contains the antibodies, and then put them. But that's something risky because you're taking something from another person if they have some other disease, and it's variable from person to person. So that's not a very reliable, always the same kind of medicine. So these companies, like among them Regeneron, have developed these so-called monoclonal antibodies. So monoclonal antibodies are antibodies that were basically artificially made. I mean, they come from a natural origin, but you modify them and you grow them in the lab, and you make large amounts of them. And in this case, they took not just one antibody, but a mix of several antibodies, and then make a medicine that is a mix of different antibodies and inject them 8 grams of it. And that lasts for a relatively long time. So a typical antibody treatment is like you get one shot, and then it lasts for several weeks. So
oh wow! So he got that probably right away, right? Thursday night.
Yeah, I think they mentioned on Friday that he got it on Friday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he got it on Friday.
And remdesivir must have started.
That's an experimental treatment, or is it the
everything is so it's a little bit like they're all experimental treatments at this point.
Okay, because
It's
I
like
think
although
remdesivir is like super experimental, right? Like the most this is the
well,
stuff I heard on like different news channels too.
I mean, both of them are kind of experimental, but it's also like a little bit of a definition. So both of those are like under emergency use authorization. So the FDA gives you permission to use it in an emergency, and they consider this situation an emergency. So now there is approval for these things to be used because remdesivir had been used before for Ebola.
Mm.
Remdesivir was the Ebola drug, but because the the enzyme that allows the virus to copy itself is of the same family, they said, okay, we're going to use the same thing. It's similar enough. Maybe it does something. And it does seem to do something. Not a whole lot, but it does something.
Mm.
So they're giving him that. So, but if they started on,
But
if
Friday,
they started when
maybe.
he on Friday when he was in the hospital, they should be giving him for 5 days in the hospital. So the fact that he left after 3 days, that means that they must be giving him, counter to normal protocol. The last 2 days, they have to give it to him in the White House. So the White House must have its own medical suite or something like that.
So wouldn't that be today? If he got it on Friday, this would be Tuesday, right? The fifth
Yeah,
day.
you would have to
Yeah,
get
yeah.
on.
Mm.
Yeah,
Cool.
that's
Did,
right.
did you have a reaction when they mentioned he had like really slight fevers, then all of a sudden they said high fevers?
Yeah, I mean the same thing happened with Boris Johnson, right? Like he was staying at home, and then suddenly a couple of days later, then he was had to be brought in the hospital. In the hospital, then he progressed to be intubated. He was in the ICU, and they didn't even mention he was intubated. Just that he said that he was in the ICU.
Oh, he was intubated? I had no
Yeah,
idea.
Yeah,
he was
Johnson.
almost dead. Right.
He himself said it's like he was 50-50, whether like he made it or not. So
Hmm.
that's you know yeah
That's not good.
it's but right now it's like I think it's like you don't know because like for example it's very difficult to know whether he is okay or not okay. So what happens is that this disease, like what I told you, has two phases. One phase is basically what the virus does to you, which are generally like mild symptoms, and then your basically your immune response is supposed to clear the virus just sort of more or less in like the schedule of a flu. So between 5 days and 7 days, you're supposed to clear this thing if it's okay, right?
Hmm.
But the problem is like the next problem comes is like if your immune response is wrong in a way, it's basically attacking your own body, then you get really, really sick. So when people get really sick, is from the immune response against the virus, not because of the virus itself. So let's see what happens in the next few days.
So do you think? I mean, he's not out of the woods at this point
Well, he probably is.
because
He got rid of the virus probably by now, but how his immune system is going to react, or when the steroids wear off, if he's not keeping up with them, I don't know what's going to happen.
One of the things that he had mentioned, I think yesterday and today, was that he is feeling better, than he has in 20 years. Is that feeling potentially, inspired or by the medication that he is taking? Like, you
Yeah, I
know,
mean, it's like if let's say we had if we had, let's say, joint problems or something like that,
mhm,
and then he got a big bolus, basically a big shot of dexamethasone, he's
mhm.
gonna feel like $1 million.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it's also this is anti-inflammatory and it's also a painkiller. Or it's
Mm,
basically because like it's basically like a really, really much more powerful than your Advil or your Aleve. It
mhm,
has the sort of the same type of effect,
mm,
but it's much stronger. The problem is like it causes other things. So for example, if you take steroids, it can weaken your immune system. It can cause you to retain fluid. You look like bloated. It can affect
he's
some
already
of
got
your
that one.
organs. Hmm?
He's already gotten that one.
Yeah, but
I mean,
even more and stuff like that. So it's like,
I don't think you can't go any further than that. So
yeah,
he's good. He's max bloated.
sclerosis is not innocuous. It's like it's basically it's a strong medicine that is appropriate for kind of severe things, but is not something that you should be using a lot of constantly, especially
But
dexamethasone.
he's got three different things, right? Remdesivir, he's got that. I mean,
Yep.
Regeneron.
Yeah,
Do they
Regeneron
count? Do
antibodies.
they do anything together? I mean, that's like a. It sounds just like he's got a lot of medicine in him right now.
Well, yeah, we actually were wondering about that too. So like a couple of us were discussing, one of the things we were discussing is like we don't know if there's any experience and with this drug interaction between the things that he got. Because he also got some vitamins, vitamin D that supposedly helps. And then
Zinc.
they got zinc, and then like, I mean, we don't know how those things interact because we have never had a clinical trial of these things together and how they interact together. We know that each of them can do something to the virus, but if there's a drug interaction, we essentially don't know that.
Hmm.
So, and the kind of a thing is like this was kind of like a big experiment, an experiment on the president.
Do
So
you
that's why I'm
think
thinking,
do you think any actual MD in like and Walter Reed would actually like prescribe those things to him, or that do you think maybe he used his presidential charisma to convince like the
I think
physicians
it's like
watching?
it's possible that somebody prescribed this thing, and it's like, and I'm sure what I think probably what happened is like, okay, they called around probably to the Regeneron people. This is, have we had any cases before of people getting remdesivir together with, with the monoclonal antibodies, and were they okay? And then it's like, were there enough cases of that they actually? So if somebody was like, let's say in the ICU and is not going to make it, they're not going to make it, so you try everything under those circumstances. They said, okay, we have this is going wrong. Let's try and put it combine these things. We don't have a choice,
Mm.
and then see if they how did these people do? Do you observe anything? But it's going to
So
be very few cases. It's not going to be like something like a rigorous clinical trial, but it's just like asking your buddy who works in the ER or in the ICU and says, "Hey, have you done this before? And were those people okay?" Kind of like that. And it's going to be based on anecdotal evidence, if any at all.
right.
So they said, did other people receive this kind of regimens and they were okay? And then because the rarest drug is the monoclonal antibody, remdesivir has been around a little bit longer. They have tried it on more people, and now the question is basically, you know, the rarest drug, which is the monoclonal antibody mix from Regeneron, is that they were going to ask, okay, the docs that tried it, did they try this other stuff together too? And then, I think it was probably something like that. They probably just went asking around.
Wow.
Mm. Wow.
Otherwise, it would be completely irresponsible.
Did you see him on video and they showed close ups of him breathing and it looked like he was having a hard time breathing?
Yeah, but I don't pay too much attention to these things because it's like, uh, you could stage anything. It's not so, yeah, it's, yeah, they could have given a cough suppressant. They could have done, they could have put in like on oxygen the entire time before, and then they start letting him talk after sitting on oxygen for like an hour or two. I mean, all kinds of things that you can do just if you want to put up a show, which he seems to like going out with the Secret Service people.
Right. I wanted to ask you about that. Like you mentioned like, that the, I guess the by then the viral count in his body would have gone down because he was at that point where he was feeling like the symptoms.
Well, no, no, the viral load. I'm pretty sure that he's shedding virus now.
You think
Like
he's infectious right now?
he's definitely infectious now.
Like, so was he seriously endangering the people
Yeah.
that were right?
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. And also because like, he was wearing a surgical mask, he was not wearing N95.
Right. He was
Or
just wearing a piece of
or
cloth over his face.
he was wearing basically like a surgical mask. So surgical mask efficiency is about 70 some percent.
Mhm.
So, I mean, he's spewing the stuff. What you could see from the person sitting in the right front seat, he was
Right.
wearing
Face shield, and then
and
he
basically he was wearing basically a mask. But you're in this small car, and early on we knew that a lot of the people who got infected were like in taxis or Uber
oh,
drivers. So that's basically you're in a small space, you're breathing the same air, you're talking probably.
mhm,
That's a recipe for getting people infected. I mean, we
mhm.
didn't know it back then,
Right.
but through those observations, those we know now that this is
Wouldn't that car have like the greatest filtration, and wouldn't it
doesn't matter.
have some kind of a barrier maybe between the front and back seats? Like
Oh
a
yeah, it's like yeah, if that would help. If they actually had a
yeah.
barrier,
It may. I don't know.
and the air was like, but I don't think.
I would think that thing could be submerged in water, and he'd probably live for like 3 days or something, right?
I think that, I mean, like,
The
I'm
question is
not
whether
sure.
between the front and the back, right?
Yeah.
Was there somebody else in the back with him?
I don't know. Yeah.
No.
I don't know.
I mean,
Either
the
way,
images they show is basically just from that side, from the right
yeah.
side of the car, and then
Right.
you can only see him, and you can see those like bulletproof glass. The
Mhm.
the window of that Suburban was substantially smaller than a regular Suburban window,
Right.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. And then it's like, and the guy in front, basically, he you could see him, and you'd assume there must be a driver.
And you just saw the fear in his face. But yeah, he was just like,
Yeah,
I'm
I
getting
mean,
it.
he must be trying to hide that fear and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Pretend, okay,
Yeah.
I'm just
So,
gonna.
so what's Trump's timetable as of now,
So,
roughly?
Roughly. Yeah.
so I think it's like right now is through the middle of the week, like let's see if he has an immune response. I think that's the key thing to see if there is a inappropriate immune response that's going to happen. So you see, there are like a lot of people um, in early on in the reports in China. You had people who got sick, and then they recover and they feel a lot better, and then soon after they feel better, they get a lot worse and they die. So, and that's because you recover from the actual virus, you clear the virus, but even when you clear the virus, your immune response still keeps going on its own, even without the virus.
Mm.
And then you collapse from that.
So do things like him taking remdesivir or just the different drugs he's taken, can that actually affect the latter portion? I mean, after he clears the virus, will these still help him into, when the thing gets
So,
down into his belly?
so yeah, so for
you
example,
know?
so the Regeneron monoclonal antibodies and the remdesivir only work on the virus itself.
Okay.
So
Wow.
after the virus is gone, then it's like probably those actually do absolutely nothing,
Mm.
But then is like the dexamethasone is gonna, if there's an inappropriate immune response, then the dexamethasone is gonna be the main thing that's gonna rely on to suppress that immune system.
Mm.
So that would be like, I mean, like I think there was this interesting case also last week of a 19-year-old college student who died. I don't know whether you guys saw that,
No.
which
No.
I heard of it.
is an
I
interesting.
heard the healthy guy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
super healthy guy.
guy. Yeah,
Yeah.
the super healthy guy. Yeah. So
Yeah.
he basically he got sick. He went home, recovered, went back to school, and then went back to school, and suddenly he died after he recovered. And then it's like, and what happened is basically something happened to his brain. We don't know exactly what happened to his brain, but it's very possible what happened to him in his brain. And like he had the immune response. The immune response took care of this thing, and then as of the virus is gone. And then as the immune response ramps up, and then maybe it made some antibody against something in your brain, and then he died. The other possibility is that the virus came back. The virus was not completely gone. The virus came back and started infecting the brain and died from the infection in the brain.
Are brain infections that common with SARS-CoV-2?
Yeah, it's like it seems to be that that is very common for people to lose their sense of smell and taste,
Right.
and that's from nerve cells,
Right.
you know, and people, at least in the lab, have shown that if you make these mini brains called organoids, they are infected very well by the coronavirus. So they can, basically, so neurological symptoms from SARS-CoV-2 are a thing that we've known very early on. They happen. We don't know, they vary a lot between people. So we don't know how severely people are infected. This is one thing. The other thing that is like that is coming up as important is heart damage. So basically, for example, they actually had all those college football players which had COVID, and afterwards they showed that at least 30% of them have myocarditis. They have damage in the heart. So this may not be that big of a deal now when they're 20-year-olds in college, but this may come up to haunt them that they might get a heart attack when they're in their 40s instead of getting a heart attack in the 70s. So, many years down the line, we could have all these people who recovered having heart problems, further down the lines, you know, with CHF and stuff like that, you know, heart failure, progressive heart failure coming up like later on, because
Wow.
the heart, as opposed to as many other organs, it never regenerates. Your cardiomyocytes and your heart tissue has no capacity to regenerate. So, for example, when you are when you have a heart attack, what happens is that a little patch on your heart gets killed,
Mm.
and then what happens is that it gets substituted by scar tissue, and it's basically like collagen that makes up. So it's that scar tissue. But that scar tissue means that you don't have a hole in your heart. It's substituted by this scar tissue, and then, um, but that thing doesn't contract. So it's not muscle that can contract. So it
Oh.
has no function. So your heart becomes weaker and weaker after everything.
Oh,
Uh,
that sounds awful.
So that's it.
I
Basically,
thanks
like,
for that. That's a really great image. I mean, the way you explained it is really great. I'd never heard that before, and it sounds awful.
actually, when you see it,
Smile bigger, Gerald. You did a great job just now.
well, yeah.
Science is wonderful. Well, it's awful. Okay, but
Yeah,
anyways,
actually, if you
now I
actually,
know.
yeah, if you look at the heart of somebody, at in an autopsy, you can actually see how many heart attacks this person had. You count the patches of gray. So the heart itself is dark red, but if you have like if you had a heart attack, there'll be a patch of dark of grayish material, and each grayish patch is a heart attack, basically.
Wow.
I had no idea about
So
that.
so right now, possibly the SARS-CoV-2 is actually causing damage to your heart. Is that what they're saying?
Yeah,
Is it like
But
scarring the heart
yeah, is that
or?
what's going on?
it's scarring. Like any type of damage in the heart is irreversible.
Hmm.
Because
So
your
it's
heart,
scarring.
once you're born and grow up and it develops into like an adult, you don't have any new heart cells ever in your life.
Mm.
you know
Are you sure about that? Like, I mean, what's that they say that like every cell replaces itself after
it
7 years?
replaces with material, but it doesn't replace the cell. If the cell is gone, it's gone. It's like same as the brain, except for like a very small amount of cells that are responsible for their sense of smell. And then in one of the memory areas called hippocampus, and like this area called dentate gyrus, there
Hmm.
is no there is no adult neurogenesis at substantial numbers. So it's
Okay.
basically that.
Yeah, because I think I saw an article somewhere just recently talking about like, because like I've heard that like the saying that like the brain like you got what we got and like that's it, but like then like they're saying like I think there was some research where they found that like
Yeah,
some brain cells do reproduce, but I
yeah,
guess
yeah.
that's not.
Actually, my neighbor in the lab for many years, the actually who now is the president of the Salk, he is famous for finding these so-called neural stem cells, with the basically adult neural stem cells, where the brain cells reproduce to a certain extent, but the proportion and the places where it reproduces is minuscule compared to the total amount. So it's never going to regenerate everything.
Mm.
It's basically It's not like, salamanders where you can actually cut off their spinal cord and then a couple of weeks it'll grow it back. Or you
Right.
can grow like half the brain, cut it off, and then in 6 months it'll grow the missing part of the brain back.
Right.
I mean, it's not that kind of thing. You have a few cells that reproduce. You have a few cells that, but the type of things that they make is very restricted. The places where it actually acts is very restricted. So it's basically like the majority of things that happen, you cannot rely on this system because as a concept, yes, okay, there are some cells that reproduce, but it's never going to be enough to do something. It's the same thing that it's like if you're not going to be able to empty out the ocean with the kitty bucket, right? You're not gonna be able to stem a tide by a bucket brigade, right?
Right.
It's like, yeah,
Right.
you have something, but it's not gonna be nearly enough.
Right. One other thing, going back to Donald Trump, though, he is talking about like doing the debates in Miami on Thursday.
Yeah, that's he might still be spewing virus at that time.
Right.
I mean, the thing is like the virus, like the tail end of virus, is very very variable. So some people stop very quickly. Other people like are shedding virus for a very long time.
Mm.
So the typical way that you handle this is like you only consider negative if you have two consecutive day tests in 2 days that are negative, and then you can be discharged.
Mm.
So you should make sure that you're not shedding any virus like that. But the question is whether he's going to accept that or not. I don't know.
Probably not.
Okay. But
Yeah.
then means that everybody, I mean, right now, I think the West Wing is being endangered on a daily basis by a guy who's spewing virus around. That's, I have no doubt.
Right.
How much? I don't know. But that he's spewing virus, I'm pretty sure that he's spewing virus.
Well, I mean, like, isn't like, have there been cases of people that would like stop, like, really being infectious, like 3 4 days after, like, the diagnosis?
Well, yeah, but it's like normally is basically the general recommendation is like 10 days after the onset of symptom is the absolute minimum.
Wow.
So his onset of symptom, the basically the onset of symptoms for him was, what was it, Thursday or Friday?
Yeah.
So you just can count the days. So until the end of this week, he should not be
Out and about.
Yeah, especially without a mask.
What about, okay, so like this brings up like something that doesn't have anything to do with Donald Trump, but like I know people who adhere to a very strict, like, 2 week like quarantine. I think there's also countries that like stick to
Yeah.
a 2 week quarantine.
Yeah. Like, for
Does it
example,
need to
my
be 2 weeks?
2 weeks is sort of like I forgot. Not 2 weeks is something like a 99.5% chance that the virus is cleared, or that you don't want that you will not have developed.
So pretty good.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
And actually, for example, that's different in different places. So, for example, in Germany, you have to have like 2 tests. They're negative. You're in quarantine. If you're 2 tests negative in quarantine, you can go out and about after you come in from somewhere else. And so they don't have the 10 days as long as you test negative. So they use PCR testing for that. In Japan, they test you on the way in to see if you have it. Just a single test. You wait 6 hours, then they take you, and then you go quarantine somewhere, and it's not defined where, which could be, your
So why would
parents'
you
house,
have to
which is
continue
probably not the greatest.
quarantining after you've been tested? And
What?
if you test and you test negative, why would you have to continue quarantining?
Because the negative test is not very reliable. The negative test can be, it can be So okay, depending on. So let's say you were infected in the plane.
Mhm.
If you were infected in the plane, for the first 2 days, the probability of a false negative is something over 50, 60%.
Oh
Wow.
wow.
So the best scenario when you are actually the most reliable test the days after infection is
Mhm.
about 6, 7 days after the contact, where after contact with the virus, where the false negative
Oh,
rate
you
is
froze.
in the
Yeah.
20, 30, 20% range. Generally
Wow.
speaking, the probability of a false negative of a PCR test is about 30%.
That's pretty high, isn't it?
Pretty high. That's why most of the places that are strict about things require two. And
Yeah.
two tests will give you a confidence of about 97%.
Wait, is that the one that goes in your nose?
Nose, throat, saliva.
But there's one that's easier than one that's they say is very painful. Like
Yeah, so the
they
so
shove that thing way up your nose. I
yeah,
mean, it's far up there.
yeah, the nose one is the so we talked about this a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
Where the virus grows the most is in the nose. So therefore, as you want to
Ah,
go there, the throat is also somewhere where it grows really well. So either the nose or the throat. But people think the nose is where you have the most virus. Therefore, probably the most reliable place to sample it from.
wow.
There was a case recently of a woman who received a nose test, and apparently, like, it punctured the back of her head. She apparently had a certain unknown potential ailment where I guess things were really thin between, from somewhere between the nose and the brain. Did
Mm-hmm.
you hear about this one? And like,
No, but I can see this happening. But also, for example, like people who do too much coke and the the septum is basically necrotic because the coke makes this vasoconstriction and there's not enough blood and that stuff dies off. You could actually
mm,
go through it.
Wow.
yeah, like apparently,
Ugh.
like brain fluid or something like that was like, it
Yeah,
punctured through into the
yeah.
brain.
I mean, there's like there are certain surgeries, for example, to your pituitary, where
Mhm.
the access is through your nose. So,
Oh,
for example, the way that like there are certain parts, let's say if you have like things that are kind of like towards the center of your brain, there's no surgical approach pathway, and in some of
Mm.
those, the best is
Ugh,
through your nose.
sounds awful. Okay. So wait. So back to Donald Trump. Still, one question is, what's your prediction? I mean, from what you've seen up to now, do you think he's fine? I mean,
I think it's probably,
or
I think
what's that?
like it's more likely than not that he's going to be fine. I mean, he has that. I mean, he had the best treatment that you could possibly have in terms of and kind of early. Almost everybody else gets this treatment kind of late.
yeah.
Him
Because
being
the
president of
earlier
the
you
United
get
States,
treated, the better you are,
yeah,
right?
how he got treated like super early for everything, like the best time frame for everything. So it's very likely that he's going to be okay. But the fact that he had to use you know the dexamethasone tells me that even under those circumstances where he got everything that was stacking the deck in his favor, he was having some issues. So if they had gone a little bit later, we probably would not be okay.
Mm.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Because
So
he's a
like
kind of in a he's in an at risk kind of a category, right?
yeah, but that's
I
like
mean,
that's statistical risk.
he's an older dude. He's a large man.
Yeah.
According to what 6'3", 230 pounds, more like 6 foot 320 pounds, right?
Yeah.
He's not 230.
No, he's probably more than that, but
He's like three. He's like 300, north of 300. Correct. I mean, wouldn't you think?
I don't know. It's like it's
Have
hard
you
for
ever
me.
seen that? You ever seen that guy? He's got a boiler. Like he's a
Yeah.
gigantic man.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, yeah. I think he's like 300 plus. Anyway, so I was. It's one of those things that I'm looking at going. He's got all these things that are absolutely awful, but then he's kind of like the medicine is actually helping and maybe working for him.
Well, I mean, these are
Alone, he would probably be dead, right? By now.
yeah. I think it's like if he had no treatment, yeah, he probably would not. I think he's very likely not to make
So
it.
I've got a question here. And Tristan asks, is it possible to test positive and be diagnosed on a Friday and then test negative on Monday and Tuesday, like the president's doctor is saying?
Oh, is he testing negative now?
Well, that's
I
what the
didn't know
doctor
that.
apparently is saying.
I think it's very unlikely. If you actually look at any of the normal, the things that have been published of what individual patients, where they follow them through,
Mhm.
that's like it's going to be lower, but it's not going to be negative.
Right. Yeah,
It's
and
like
then he
very
asked,
unlikely.
what is the shortest amount of time it can take to test negative after testing positive?
I think probably like in the range of 5 days or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me see. Do I have
Did,
any?
did, did you at any time from when, like over the weekend, think that he was going to get into big trouble, like health wise, or were you kind of watching it at all, or did you
Oh,
actually not? I was wondering if you were just watching and reading as much as you could about it, or were you kind of indifferent, like also, you
well,
know what I
I
mean?
read about it. Actually, I was like, I was checking the news and things like that. But then it's like very quickly that I realized that this is what they're saying is unreliable because there are inconsistencies left and right. And then all the inconsistencies when you're okay, I don't know. It's like you're telling me things, but I really don't know what I can believe. And the things that they're telling you are completely incompatible with each other. So I mean, either they're lying or they're incompetent, and neither of them is good, right?
Right, right. Richmond Pinball asks, what the fuck is going on between the FDA and White House over vaccine approval requirements? I don't
Uh,
understand how the White House has the power to control the scientific community from just sharing facts. Ah,
well, there's a so that's more like a regulatory issue. The the FDA wants to put basically they say, okay, you have to observe the vaccine for 2 weeks before, sorry, for 2 months before you can approve anything or declare it to be relatively safe, even have the emergency use authorization. And that's what the FDA said. You have to observe it for, from the last dose that you get. But if you do that, then any possible authorization would happen after the election. So what
oh,
they're trying to do is that, okay, we're not making this requirement. Anytime that we say that there is some effect of the vaccine, then it's like we're gonna declare it that it works. Well,
Oh, there's a cat.
there's a
that
cat.
There's a cat. Oh,
cat.
I was like, your hair is flowing, but it's a
Oh,
cat. Okay.
Bring the cat. Oh, what a
Oh,
beautiful
that
cat.
that cat has the eyes of evil.
what?
Yeah. Oh, what a beautiful
Anyway,
cat. Yeah, cat
Interesting.
break.
So anyway,
Yeah.
that's like yeah, that cat is Francis. Anyway,
Um, yeah,
so where were we? Ah,
we're talking
yeah,
about
the authorization. So yeah, so basically like that. But that has become like super relevant because, for example, both the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine just
mm,
today they announced that they had, I think, at least 5 people who had severe side effects. People
wow.
who develop a high fever, basically incapacitating headaches and things like that. So there is an report of severe side effects from both of those lead
Oh.
RNA vaccines.
wow.
So you know, and this happened
That's
right after
five out of how many thousands of people that they're testing the vaccine,
their targets were like 30,000 people,
right?
but you actually have to have so the 30,000 people, and you actually have to have sufficient of those to be infected because otherwise you don't know whether it worked or not. So
Right.
you have basically your placebo and you're actually basically the
The
actual
actual
vaccine people. And
right.
then you have to have two injections because we already know that this virus naturally you don't get very good immunity. And we have actually seen like 2 cases where it was clearly demonstrated, one in Hong Kong, where a person was reinfected after 4.5 months. One virus was from Hong Kong, one virus was from Spain. He got tested on his way back from Spain and got infected by a virus from Spain. And another person in Reno. In one case, the person had mild symptoms and then the Hong Kong one, and then asymptomatic the second time. And the second one person became worse the second time. So we don't know because we don't have enough numbers whether so basically like in 4 or 5 months, you probably can become susceptible to the virus again, even if you had a natural infection. So the vaccine has to be better than a natural infection and developing immunity, which is possible. We have vaccines that against things that naturally people don't become immune to very easily. So for example, Gardasil, the human papillomavirus vaccine that prevents cervical cancer in women, that one is something that you naturally don't ever develop good immunity. But with 3 shots of Gardasil, you can actually get really good protection against this virus. So it's possible to develop this. So, but it requires most of these call you a booster shot. So you get the first shot, and then in the case of the coronavirus vaccines is you get in the second shot something in the order of 19 to 21 days after you get a second shot, and that's supposed to boost your immune system further. So the people who had the side effects, they got the side effects when they got the second shot with the booster shot.
Oh.
So basically that has to do is almost certainly has to something to do with the immune response of these people. They're getting an immune response, but it's so strong that that cause some problems.
So we're not ready. There's no vaccine coming soon.
Well,
there's no October surprise of a vaccine, right?
I don't think that's realistic. I mean, it's like also like I would not trust it. Even if they said that in October they'll release it, I would not trust it because, any normal vaccine process takes years or decades to be out.
Right.
In normal circumstance. We're trying to push this ahead, and we're willing to take some risk because this is such a societal disruptive event, and we are willing to say, okay, it's not going to be perfect. Some people are going to do badly with this thing, but the question is like, where do you draw the line? And then it's like, that's basically what we have decided. And also the other thing that's super important is like, how can we know how long the vaccine lasts? And there's no way that we can know how long the vaccine lasts until we wait that amount of time, right? So their goal of the stated goal of the companies is that what they would consider success is that if a vaccine that gives substantial immunity that lasts 6 months or more.
I knew it. 6 months. You told us last time.
Yeah, 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is like your measure of success, right? So, but if it
lasts, low measure, the lowest possible measure of success, right?
Because we already know that other people, now we know that some people got reinfected in 4.5 months. And we know that an antibody response of people disappears around 3 months or 3 to 4 months.
So in this case, science just can't beat this virus, huh?
Not within the time frame that the president wants.
Just sheer science. I'm talking about, but science, I mean, you could say, hey, if everyone wore a mask, like really isolated each other for whatever it is, right? A month or 2 months, it could be gone, right? Type of thing. But
well, science has the solution. Just
that requires humans, though. I'm talking about just science.
Okay, basically, like, okay, you want technological solutions where you don't have to put any, but basically you don't have to have behavior.
No, we're lazy. It's like Gen Z style here. We just want instant results and no work put in.
Yeah. So
feed me, motherfucker. That's really it, right? Ultimately, that's it. Feed me.
Yeah. It's basically like the solution to obesity that says, okay, I still want to eat what I eat. I don't want to exercise. I just want exercise in a pill.
Just give me an injection and help me shed 6 inches off my waistline or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. This is the kind of solution that you said that you want. So,
No.
you know,
I mean, I'm just saying that is the human hope, actually, right? Is that's exactly what they hope for,
yeah.
but that
No, I'm
that
not saying it's like impossible. I'm just
right.
like most of these things, like the less you have to do is like the more effort has to go into it. So you and also like is and also because
Yeah.
the virus has only been around, for now,
A year,
um,
a little over a year,
11
huh?
months or so, not quite
Uh-huh.
a year,
Yeah.
as far as we can tell, since December of last year. So, you know, you haven't had enough people and enough time to work all these problems out.
But as a scientist, do you think this is going well? Not the virus, but the response to the virus
Oh yeah, and I
scientifically.
think the willingness of people to respond to it has been like spectacular, and people really want to do something about it. I mean, there are lots of people who wanted to drop whatever else they were doing to do this kind of thing. But also the thing is like the opportunities to do this, like the funding, the availability of resources is just not there. So although there was a lot of talk about it, I don't think that I mean, like for example, in terms of the funding, the almost all of it, in my impression, is like it went to very few places, and then mostly went to the the vaccine program. I mean, rightfully so, but you should probably allocate some more funds. You had to spend, over a trillion in the stimulus package, in the rescue package, right? And then it's like how you didn't spend more than maybe a couple billion, which is a thousand-fold difference, in terms of trying to get things moving. So anyway, you should try to recruit all the people who are willing to do something and to do stuff. So, but I mean, it's like if what a half-assed job doesn't get anything done in this particular case. It's basically like it's kind of like what we have like in the US in terms of containment strategy. We have these half-assed containment strategies. They're like,
Yeah.
Let's say California does a really good job, but if
And
Arizona
Florida doesn't.
and everybody else comes from Arizona, then California is
Yeah.
screwed, although they did their homework. And same thing everywhere, right? So you need to have a coordinated thing. It's like, and although we have China as an authoritarian country, people are partying, people are going on
Yep.
vacation.
There's raves.
Yeah.
I mean, this kind of thing. But they did their homework. They can do this. If it was really that high of a risk, they would, if they allow people to do this when the virus was still around, they would be throwing away the entire effort. So the fact that
Like we did.
Yep.
yeah,
Or we
so,
have, right?
yeah,
Kind of.
so
Yeah.
so the fact that they're doing this and this stuff is not coming back, that tells me that they're not faking that the country is clean.
So do you think, I mean, much more money would have helped a vaccine be made
No,
faster at
I
this
don't
point?
think I don't think the more money would make the vaccine, but you should prepare for the next step. Like for example, okay, if you have the vaccine, these are your lead vaccines, but do you have a backup plan to that? And do you have a backup plan to your backup plan? If this one doesn't work, what do you do next? And there's no talk whatsoever, about what would happen if like these, you know, I would say 6 or 7 efforts that there are, and they're basically based on 2 technologies. If those 2 don't work, what will they do? I haven't heard a single thing about what would happen if those don't work. I mean, they're
Hardcore
basically
lockdown.
technologies, huh?
Hardcore lockdown?
Well, I mean, that would be one way. If they were willing to have a hardcore lockdown enforced by the National Guard, where people get shot for not wearing their face mask, that kind of thing.
You should get shot for being seen. But yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
or something. Anyway, if they were to do it, and also the massive testing and basically because and
Yeah,
contact
that too.
because just testing that also doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
Los Angeles has been in what has been called the purple, um, like stage of,
Yeah,
you know, whatever quarantine
yeah,
or shutdown or whatever. However, like whenever I go out, whenever I like walk around, like say Sawtell or where Giant Robot is, or
yeah.
like there it is, especially on a weekend, it is like there are people everywhere. And I imagine like that is the way it is in a lot of areas where a lot of people congregate. As a virologist, what do you see when you see this?
Well, I mean, I think I understand that people are tired and sick of this, but it's like if you do a half-ass job, you have to do it forever. If you do a good job, it's a limited amount of time that you have to do this. So that's, I mean, that's from a, what do you want to do? It's like this is a societal choice that we're making. Do
I
we
remember
actually
when
bite the bullet for a short time, or do we actually have to deal with this, never get the thing done, and have to go back and forth and live with a moderate level of discomfort forever?
what about like in the beginning? Like I remember when like March in March and April, like it was like I felt like LA was like going hardcore with like the freeways were almost empty,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
like nobody was out on the streets, and like toilet paper was like nowhere to be found.
Well, the toilet paper thing is a complete nonsense.
Right.
Why that happened?
Yes.
It's just one of those like people's perception of it.
Mhm. I'm
But
just using the toilet paper as a marker of
yeah, yeah,
time
yeah,
of when
yeah.
but like didn't that help at all?
No, it helped. If you actually look at the curve in LA, it actually peaked and it went down, but
Mm,
didn't go all the way down.
mm,
I mean, we had enough activity in LA that was, I mean, a lot of it was the essential workers and people who couldn't afford. But that's the thing. Like if you have other places, when people couldn't afford things, you have government help for the people who cannot afford, so they could stay home,
right.
right? If you actually if you provide means for people to stay home, they will stay home. It's just when they cannot stay home, then
Mm,
people have to break the rules because they have no choice, right?
right.
It's basically like the same thing. Why do we want to take care of, now it should be obvious to everybody, why do you want to treat people in skid row for potential infectious diseases? Because if you take those diseases out of the people in skid row, they're not going to spread it to everybody else,
Right.
right? You don't want to have a reservoir of disease sitting there that whenever the circumstances are right, then it can spread into the larger community and get everybody else. And then, this is not about fairness. Okay, they didn't pay their taxes, therefore they should not get health care. You're protecting yourself by giving health care to the people to prevent them to infect you later on.
Right.
This kind of
Right.
thing. So
Yeah.
anyway.
You solve a lot of your problems by buffering, making sure that your neighbors aren't going to become problems.
Yeah, and also for example, for the longest time, the CDC strategy to manage aggressively what was going on in Africa and in China, and so if we can solve the problem in Africa and in China, then we don't have to deal with the problem here,
Right.
right?
Mm.
If you have the pandemic flu and it never gets out of China, or like SARS last time, that it barely got into the US, got a little bit to Canada, but mostly was like stopped in Asia, then nothing happened. Like
Was
MERS, the other coronavirus, that was stopped, in the Middle East and in Asia. There was an outbreak in Korea, but it
Right.
never made it here.
Right.
is it
So
because like let's say China, for example, is more authoritarian, and that's like that's the place where you want to nip in the bud. It's nippable in that bud, but once it
yeah,
gets here, it's really hard to control, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
You
mean,
know,
there is part of that. I think there's truth in that.
there's a little bit of control there. Like, what is it they were doing? Is nail gunning people's doors shut and stuff like that, right? But
Yeah.
know, and arresting people on the street and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. I just think for us here, we have too many different beliefs and of freedom, I guess, you know, beliefs of freedom. And then, you know what I mean? And maybe attitudes. I mean, I was earlier making fun of like Gen Z. Hey, just, you know, like, I don't want to do anything. I just want a vaccine, and I want to be able to not change my life. Right. But it's one of those things where, no, that's kind of human nature, I guess. Right. That's not everybody, but it's human nature. It's everyone. It's every generation, everywhere. To some extent, we want the easiest way out. Right. That's, I want the easiest way out, frankly. Like, you know, I'd love to just take a pill and be done with this, but I mean, that's, you know, in the true inside, that's just, I wish it was like that, but I
mean,
like, I think that's the problem. We actually believe that, maybe.
We all want it to be like that. The question is whether it can be like that.
Yeah. No, but I think some of us believe it can be, so we're just like, fuck all, you know, I'm waiting for this pill, the magic pill to happen, you know, I want to keep partying, you know, or whatever it is, but yeah, I think we're too different here.
Why do you think the CDC isn't contact tracing the White House right now?
They're not letting them.
What?
They said they're not. I saw in the news that they said they're not contact tracing.
Right. Why?
They don't want to. I mean, it's like.
Is it a political reason, or?
I'm pretty sure it's a political reason. There is no scientific reason not to contact trace.
Do you think that it has, like, the White House is putting pressure on the CDC to not, like, you know?
I would imagine. Because there's like, if you want to control this thing, the logical thing to do is to contact trace. So all the people that you suspect are potentially infectious, you stop them. And then once you stop it, then, you know, you're much more likely to stop the spreading of this thing. Right now, it's basically like, okay, whoever is infected, and it's basically, if they're asymptomatic still till now, they still have a chance to infect everybody else.
Yeah. Do you think everybody, I guess, I don't know if you've read, but do you think people in the White House and all the people that might have gotten infected via maybe that party or whatever was the event they had, do you think they're getting the same treatment as Donald Trump?
That's a good question. I don't know.
You don't know? Okay, I wasn't sure if you read anything because Chris Christie got it, and he too is a large man.
Yeah,
like he's probably very at risk. He's a really huge guy.
Yeah,
and that he could be at risk. You know who that is?
Yeah,
Luke.
New Jersey,
Chris Christie, former governor of New Jersey.
Yeah.
And he got it too. So I'm like, he's probably in that at risk group as well. Yeah. But they haven't said anything about that because they. Yeah, no, okay. Wasn't sure if you heard anything.
I don't know. It's like, I mean,
it just seems like all these people in the White House. Someone seems like, out of it by percentages, is going to get sick badly.
And Stephen Miller just got announced earlier today as being infected.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if, I mean, of the White House group, I'm wondering if they're going to give them better treatment so no one gets intubated, basically, so they look better. You know what I mean?
Like, you know, I think at this point is like, I think like you would definitely want to give them both antibodies and remdesivir. Entire course.
Yeah, they're probably all getting it, right? You don't want like three. You don't want 2 or 3 people to get intubated that were infected maybe at that event, and then.
Yeah, but the thing is like.
Just looks really bad.
So the
I don't know.
The antibody is an interesting case also because that one they gave Trump officially. There was a FDA exception made for that.
Oh, just for him.
Just for him. And then it was given by the company as compassionate use.
Compassionate use.
Yeah. It's basically like that was the thing. But it's like that, you know, this compassionate use is really rare and is very, you know, the majority of people who get sick are not going to be able to get it. Right now, the only people who can get it are the people who are enrolled in the clinical trial. So if you're basically any normal person, you will not be able to access that.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess in that way, it's good to be president, but.
Yes, I mean, you definitely are getting better treatment than anybody else.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Mm.
Oh, okay. Well, shoot. Any other questions, Luke?
Are you okay, Luke?
We're
Because I
Welcome to
ask it every.
Fairfield.
we
I
are all fucked.
I ask it every time, Gerald. I ask it every time. Man, are we gonna be okay, man?
You're gonna be okay. I think you're gonna be okay. But just stay away from the virus. Stay away from the virus because even if you
So
recover,
like like I went by I stopped by Giant Robot on Sunday, and like I walked by Tsujita,
Mhm.
like from across the street, and like all the tables are being used. There are people walking all around that fucking corner.
Oh,
No one like is seated, is wearing a mask.
and they're
And
close. Like they're actually close, right? Like if I coughed and you're literally an arm's length because I'm walking by you, right? You're not 6 feet away.
no, and like I look at that and I'm like,
Air goes down, right? Achoo! Oh, it
well,
goes straight
am
down.
I like thinking logically, or am I being like paranoid?
no, I think it's like from Japan. There were a whole bunch of studies that showed that restaurants are major source of um, of spreading of the
Even outdoors. What about outdoors? That's you said that was an experiment last time. I'm wondering if
no,
I mean, it seems like it's better, but I don't know.
I mean, I think technically it should be 20-fold better. That's what we think of
Yeah.
outdoor in general, like the 20.
But I'm not hearing anyone getting sick from outdoor dining. Like I haven't heard that
I'm not
yet.
hearing about anybody getting sick from airplanes. Like what are those?
No, they are things from airplanes. So there was like a case that I just read from I think either Morbidity Mortality Weekly Report
Oh, my
or
favorite zine. Yeah.
yeah, or Emerging Infectious Diseases. One of the two journals I
Oh,
forgot.
that's a hot zine too.
Yeah.
Those are hot.
Yeah, so there's a hot zine. Right now, it's a hot zone zine.
All right. So it's happening. There's airplane
Where
transmissions
they
from
describe a
airplane.
case of two passengers, infecting the crew.
Oh
Is that
my god.
early on,
Business
or
class.
is this like now? Like
No, it's like I mean the reports by the time it gets into a paper, it has passed several months. It's not like
right?
Oh, I see.
no.
Right.
So
Like, is the mask like even in an airplane helping?
definitely. And also like the other interesting thing that came out from a study in China is that glasses are helping.
Yeah,
Which
I
I
heard
don't quite
that.
understand exactly why, but
Blocking particles in the eye.
so when people early on in the infection in China, they actually had the all the healthcare workers were wearing like the full goggles, and they're talking about infection through the eye and stuff like that. And then we didn't hear about it for a long time. But then the study came out, and then look at in this city in China. I forgot the name of the city, but it's basically that generally in general, like the risk of people to be infected was like 30% for that age group and things like that. But if you wore glasses, the probability of being to be in the ICU was only like 5% of people were in the for the same equivalent group in terms of age and everything else normalized. If you wore glasses, only 5% of people ended up in the hospital.
Maybe you touch your eyes less. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
you touch your eyes less, or actually, it actually provides some physical protection that your eyes get, the droplets are less likely to end up in your eyes.
Yeah.
It's not
Luke,
really clear exactly. They only
get some
have
glasses, Luke.
I should look into it. I do feel like my eyes are kind of getting tired lately, but like
anyway,
What
so
about the argument for gloves? Like I hate wearing those freaking plastic gloves because like it just makes my hands sweat. Like versus just like every time I go somewhere I reach for that bottle of like hand sanitizer and
I think I think the gloves and the things like that, gloves has a behavioral disadvantage. So a behavioral disadvantage of gloves is that if you wear gloves and then you think that you're safe, you're gonna start doing unsafe things with your gloved hands. You can start touching everything and spraying like that. Whereas, if you actually just use hand sanitizer and wash them frequently, don't touch your face and stuff like that. I think in a practical sense, this is my sense, but I haven't seen a study comparing the two. I think this might actually be in a functional way, in a practical way. It might be better if you just wash your hands frequently and don't touch your face and basically use hand sanitizer frequently, etc.
Right. Like
So because you
I
have the awareness is much more important.
right, because I mean, I can understand like if you're working like at a restaurant and you're handling money and you're handling credit
Yeah,
cards all the time,
yeah,
like
exactly,
one after another, after another, after another,
exactly.
like having having gloves
Yeah,
might like
yeah, yeah.
kind of help.
I think in that situation, I think it's like we can just all use common sense. It's like if something sticks, you know,
Mhm.
how would it, how would you pass this thing on? It's like the thing that early on that I told you guys that there was this NHK documentary where they had a fake buffet where they had this invisible paint, and
Right,
then you see where all the paint went,
right, with the black light. Yeah.
yeah, with a black light, and then you could actually see that. I think that exemplifies how things transmit.
Right,
You
right.
know,
Yeah,
but
gets everywhere
yeah,
So
basically.
gloves
but
optional, masks required. Glass
yeah,
is
I
a
think
great idea.
yeah, I think that is yeah, I think that's a I think that's a good guideline, and also like and get masks that work whenever possible.
And masks that work, such as N95s, do the triple
Well,
layer
it's like you
like
can actually get the Korean ones, the KF94s. They actually, I saw some people testing those,
yeah.
and in terms of filtration, they are actually some of them look better than K95.
Yeah, I saw I see ads. I get ads on Facebook for
Yeah,
those
the problem is
masks.
like what can you trust, right? So the problem is like you can trust, and some people are, you know, if you believe these people, they actually the tests look legit. The
Mhm.
way they tested looked legit, and then the numbers seem, it looks like a real test to me, and the way they're doing it seems correct.
Right,
So I mean, there are people who are actually testing some of these masks because there's no way for you to test yourself.
right. What do
When
you like?
you're
What about those weird news, like at those experiments they show on like the nightly news, where it's like, oh, there's a like they put a mask on a like a mannequin thing that exhales whatever particles, and
yeah
um, they show like, okay, well, here's what it's like, with a typical medical mask, and here's like a scarf,
yeah
or whatever. Like,
Yeah, I mean, those are the ways people actually. This is the normal way people test these kind of things, and
okay,
that's a. And normally you actually just do it with salt water because you don't want to put the real virus in. So
right,
actually, we're making something along those lines too. We're making this virus, the real virus, but it doesn't have any genetic material, so it's completely safe.
right,
And we're just going to put it in these particles and droplets and see what doesn't material does it stick to, and how many can you get into a droplet, how many would land, and to get some of this data.
right,
So yeah, so Junko and myself made a whole bunch of them. Now you can actually see them. They're fluorescent, so you put them on the black light, they shine green or they shine red,
right, right,
or
right.
they
Wow.
you could actually visualize them. And the other ones that we can we're making it that you can develop, so they will be basically if the virus is there, they will make a black stain.
Mm,
So you can actually see, oh, it's stuck to this thing. And like, but these are the fake viruses you can do tests with, to test
right.
Wow.
materials, to test face masks, and
Cool.
see that. So yeah, so we're trying to make some of these things.
Wow.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
Gerald, it's
yeah.
always great having you on this show.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
Great.
Like,
I feel more unsafe.
but
It
more, I
it kind of
feel like
grounds
I
me.
understand like this. Every time we talk on this podcast, I feel like I get a better, stronger understanding of what the hell's going on out there. Of how
Agreed.
this is working. I mean, I obviously have when it comes to actual treatments, I have no freaking clue. But like, like I think it always helps to like be reaffirmed of like, you know, yes, you read that right. Because a lot of the
Yeah.
you know
Yeah. The problem is like,
vocabulary is just kind of like, ooh, you
yeah,
know.
the
So
biggest problem is like we have too much unreliable information out there.
yes,
It's hard for you to figure out what is true and what is not true. It used to be we have a couple sources that we find reliable and we can pretty reliably say this is this is probably true because it came from here or there. But now it's like it's it's a shit show.
It is a shit show.
Yeah.
In this country, like it's just showing how the experiment fails. You know, if democracy is an experiment, you know, then like
Yeah.
it's just shown like a gigantic, like we're only dealing with a freaking disease that like can take maybe like 2% of the population, which is a huge freaking number. But like, what if it was a 5%er? What if it was a 10%er?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are diseases that take 30% plus of people.
right? You
And
know,
there was a four corners virus that took like 100% at the beginning.
Wow.
And that exists in the United States. That's an important one. That's called a four corners virus because it's in the four corners, like the New Mexico, the four corners of the state,
Oh, that was
Utah.
one. I think you mentioned that before. It was.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep, that one.
Wow.
That took everybody.
Wow. When was that?
I think it was like late 90s.
Late 90s?
Yeah.
I didn't even hear about it
Yeah, I
then.
didn't even hear about that.
Wow. Wait,
I
you
was
mean like
talking about
18
virology,
like 1890s?
no, 19.
1990s, right? No, seriously, I wouldn't have heard of that. I guess I probably didn't even make the news.
Yeah, it still happens like less, but it's still happening.
Yeah.
We might get more with climate change though.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's another
then there's
discussion.
that.
That's another discussion. If we make it out of this, we'll deal with that.
Yeah.
We'll destroy that first to get out of this. Then we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we could raise the temperature so high here that no like coronavirus could possibly survive.
Oh, I would not be surprised if this coronavirus that appeared is actually a consequence of climate change. For example, like something like that.
Could be.
Okay, you had constant climate change. The bats moved from one place to another. They were
Right.
no longer were not longer in the forest. They're looking for other places because they don't have enough food anymore.
Yeah, they might be eating different kinds of things that react a different way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
and then
interacting with actual
more contact with
society.
humans. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anything that will cause more contact with humans will cause this. So we should be watching out for the next one.
Yeah. Oh,
Terrible.
right. So,
Okay.
thank you, Gerald.
Wait. Lastly, should we be getting a flu shot?
Yes, you definitely should get a flu shot.
I've never had one in my life, so is it time?
Yeah, it's like
I've never had
good
one.
time now to get the flu shot because like if you get the other thing together with the flu, you're gonna be worse off.
I usually get my flu shots in November. Like, is that too late in the season or?
No, it's okay. It's like I mean the thing is like if you take it too early, is the drawback that the immunity kind of drops a little bit.
Right.
So you
So
want
when's
to
a good like? Is it October? Like this month? a
October
good
is
time?
good because before it, especially here, October is good because it's before the temperature and humidity starts changing.
Right. Right.
So
Let's be at the top of that bell curve, Luke. Right time. The right time. It's
Yeah.
coming soon. The
timing
right time is.
everything, dude.
Glad you didn't do it a month ago. The timing is right, coming right up, according to Gerald. Get your flu shot
Yeah.
soon.
Like-
What's too late? Like December? Because you're still going up
December
the
is
curve.
Probably too late. And like,
Yeah, you're just on your way up. Too late.
yeah. So for example, people were like wondering what happened because last time when the coronavirus appeared, by the time the coronavirus appeared, the flu was already kind of going away. So then it's like you didn't have the coincidence of the two.
Is there a difference between getting flu shots like at like a CVS or a Walgreens?
They're all the same.
Oh, really? Like, so if I go to like, there's just CVS walking distance from me, I could just go to that CVS, pay the whatever, and get my flu shot, and it'll be the same thing if I went to UCLA for my annual physical and got a flu shot there.
Yep, it'll be the same
Okay.
wherever you
All
want.
right, everybody.
All right.
Doesn't matter. Get your flu shot, I guess. I've never had one, so this might be the first time.
Yep. Yep.
I think that's not a bad thing unless you're, there's like, and I think they don't make them with eggs anymore. Before it was like, if people are allergic to eggs, they shouldn't have it because they made them in eggs.
Weird.
The vaccine was made from out of eggs. So they take
Oh
an
wow.
egg, you peel it off a little bit, and there's this membrane underneath, and that's where they grew
Wow.
the flu shot.
Oh wow.
That's some delicate work there.
Yeah, and basically you had like assembly chain of people doing that kind of thing, putting this thing on the chorioallantoic membrane on the.
Wow. Probably made in China by children, but it's all.
You
No,
need
it's
those
like
delicate hands. You need that great like muscle control.
and when there's whips, you learn. When your parents get locked up because you fail, you learn.
Oh, I don't think it's that bad, but you do
Oh.
learn.
no, those are
Okay, bottom line is you learn under duress. You learn. That's
Yes,
probably the
under
fact.
duress you learn.
Yeah.
we were going
Yeah.
for a Singaporean model.
Actually, that was one of the things I
Oh,
was
yeah.
going to mention was like, I read something that like the one of the antibody like injections that that Trump got was apparently like based off of like Singapore, kind of came from sourced from a Singaporean, which is just ironic since Singapore is mostly Chinese, and so it's like the
You had a Chinese cure.
yeah, yeah. A cure
Chinese
from a
cure.
Chinaman, to cure the Kung flu. But like that's just like ironic kind of funniness, you know.
Yeah, it's possible. I don't know where the Regeneron antibodies came from, who they actually came from, a person or not.
Yeah, it was some Singaporean friend of mine like posted it. I don't even want to look it up. So,
Okay.
but all
All right.
right.
Thank you, Gerald.
Thank you, Gerald.
All right.
Appreciate it.
It's always a
Yeah.
pleasure.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time.
Okay.
Sayonara. Thanks.
Bye.